Welcome to Liverpool and our annual conference 2018. It is an incredible honour to be standing here as your new national president. This organisation was commended to me by my father when he was ahead. We remain prestigious, highly valued by members, and taken seriously by politicians of all persuasions. As National Vice President over the past year, I've seen firsthand how valued our organisation is by individual members and policymakers alike. We are the trusted professional association and union, managing that fine balance between constructive engagement with the government and making sure we represent the views of the profession. That's why we're happy to host Damien Hines here this afternoon. That's why he's comfortable enough to come here and take questions from you. That will be a good session, and as a relatively new Secretary of State, he deserves a chance to lay out his vision to us. At this point, I want to offer a huge vote of thanks to Anne Lyons for her leadership of the association over the past year. Anne is a formidable and resilient leader, and NEHT has grown and strengthened during her year as president. Thank you, Anne, for your leadership, sense of direction and friendship this past year, and I hope that I can carry on where you've left off and continue your good work. I do have to tell you, though, that as a teenager, there was absolutely no way that I was ever going to be a teacher. And I told my parents so. This was often greeted with a wry smile from my dad. Maybe he knew something or saw something in me. I'd come home from school to a conversation at the dinner table with Mum and Dad was a head teacher in 2 different special schools, and Mum was a deputy head teacher in special ed as well. And I distinctly remember coming home, watching TV, and watching my mum fall asleep with a pile of books on her knee, and just thinking to myself, there's no way I'm doing that for the rest of my life. Unsure of what the future held, I did a combined studies degree at Matlock College. And halfway through that course, I took a year out to help run the Students' Union. Sounds familiar? I guess that sense of moral and social justice has always been there. And I've always wanted to help people who I feel don't have the right level of support from the top. At the time our college was being closed down, we were being amalgamated, and I was fighting all of that because I felt it was an injustice and a backward step. However, after the year out, I finished my course, and during that time, completed a work placement in a school in Belper in Derbyshire. From then on, it was that experience of working with children and seeing how much you can do for them, both in terms of their academic and social learning, that really fired me. The sort of impact that you can have on young people's lives is like no other job. Of course, I'm preaching to the converted here. Why else are you all here, despite so many challenges and obstacles? It's the passion for the children and young people in our schools that drives us. That first step meant that for me, there was no going back. So I completed a PGCE, which was great because it meant I could get my hands dirty in the classroom. And I really, really enjoyed that year. I realized that clearly this was my calling. People had talked previously about calling in life, and I'd never really experienced that until I went into the classroom and did that placement. I know that passion exists in today's school leavers and graduates. We have to find a way to convert more of them into the teachers of today and the leaders of tomorrow. My first job was in the Midlands. I did 2.5 years in a little primary school in Birmingham, and it was there that I guess I started to realize the real influence I could have as a teacher on children's lives. I remember one of the kids in my first ever class wasn't particularly gifted in maths or English, but I also ran the school football team, and he would often come along. One Friday night, it was absolutely tipping it down. So instead of playing football, I took the kids for a run around the field. And there was this one lad who was just so much quicker than the rest. So I said to him, you really need to look at taking this up. You're good. Fast forward 12 years to the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and I turn on the TV, and he's there running 400 metres for Great Britain. I don't claim any credit for that, but it did really bring home to me the power that we have in terms of shaping lives and the sort of impact it's possible to have. His name's Daniel Keynes. Look him up. Daniel was an individual who had real skill and ability that wasn't made immediately obvious by standardized testing. But it really shaped my thinking around meeting the needs of the whole child and finding where their talents lie. As we've said many times at NEHT, test and exam data are only part of the picture when judging a school's effectiveness or a pupil's success. All children have gifts. It's our job as teachers and school leaders to provide the sort of opportunities that allow these gifts to manifest themselves and be cultivated. That's why the impact of government cuts to education has had such a negative impact on schools and school children. Cuts have narrowed curriculum choice and opportunity, which cuts down on the sort of opportunities which saw Daniel find his calling. With more funding and fairer accountability system, we can plan all sorts of activities that might just be the one thing that a child responds to. Without that, we're often forced to restrict our curriculum to English and maths, which betrays so many children of their wider abilities. We'd have failed children like Daniel, but he found his way in the world because he found a passion outside of reading, writing, and maths, where he excelled. That's why we must make sure that our schools provide as many opportunities as possible for children and young people to demonstrate their gifts, because quite often those gifts will be their route to a successful and happy life as they move into adulthood. That's not saying that we're not teaching maths and English. Progress in maths and English are improved when children have access to other activities and opportunities. There's a combination of the two where they supplement each other and support each other. I just think that was a really important lesson early in my teaching career. Today, that aim is much more of a fight than it ought to be. In the end, funding always limits all of our ambitions. I don't want to be disappointed by that anymore. I've had a lifetime of disappointment as a Preston North End supporter. Dear Secretary of State, I'd like some light at the end of the tunnel, please. As a teacher, you very rarely see the fruits of the work that you do with the children. So one of the things I love hearing about is ex-pupils and what they've gone on to do. We had a pupil recently at St Nicholas who came back to do our Leavers Assembly last summer. He was a lad who was born and brought up in Blackpool, loving to dance. Not the usual chosen pastime for boys in Blackpool, so you can imagine how it might have gone for him. However, one of the things we did at St Nick's was to make sure that everyone in the school understood that we thought that what he was doing was absolutely amazing. To be fair, the quality of his dancing helped. This lad's name is Brandon Hutchinson, and I'm delighted that he and his mum are in the audience today. Brandon was held in awe by his peers, particularly the boys who thought he was amazing for what he was doing and realized that it took an enormous amount of dedication. I think that reflects the culture that we have at our school that allows us to have many boys in our choir, for example. It's really important to break down and challenge the gender stereotypes and expectations imposed by wider society. The minute you go down that route, you shut down a whole host of opportunities for children. For me, it's always been about opening doors for children, and latterly, as a head, doing the same for staff. Primary Futures is a fantastic example of this work, building aspiration, focus, direction, and breaking down gender stereotypes. Primary Futures should be a constituent part of every primary school's offer, and the same goes for Inspiring the Future in secondary. We've seen lives changed by the work of Primary Futures, And the impact of having people from the world of work inspiring youngsters in school is immeasurable. It really is time that the DfE recognise primary futures for what it is and could be for so many children, and funds it rather than expecting it to continue on a shoestring and the goodwill of school leaders. Every year, NEHT's president picks a charity to work with. This year, I'm so pleased to announce that the children's mental health charity Place to Be will be our official charity partners. We've worked together for many years, as Catherine said, as campaigners during Children's Mental Health Week and on the Mentally Healthy Schools website, which launched earlier this year. It's a fantastic piece of work, and I urge you to make use of it in your schools. I look forward to the next 12 months, working more closely with Place to Be than ever. After 2.5 years in Birmingham, I moved back home without a job to go to, but I managed to get a temporary job in a residential special school just outside Preston with a class of 7. I genuinely think that spending at least some of your career in special education is one of the most worthwhile things that you can do. I also think that good teaching is about breaking things down into chunks that each child can understand and move forward with. Special education showed me that. Funding for children with high needs is at a crisis point. The importance of high needs funding is reflected by the fact that we have so many motions on this issue at conference this year. I also urge you to look at our high needs funding report, which is published today. My next job came as a Year 1 teacher. I was junior trained, so this was well out of my comfort zone. But again, it's sometimes good to do something that you've not done before. It also means that I can empathise with infant staff and the pressures that they feel and the challenges and joys that they experience. My first leadership role was an old bee allowance in Fleetwood, and one of the teachers from the school I was leaving openly said, "Who does he think he is?" I guess questioning my ambition. I thought long and hard about what they said because it really stung me as a young teacher. But then the more I thought about it, the more I've realised that I've always wanted to make a difference to the lives of children. And every step up I've taken, it's made a difference to more children. I'd like to think in a positive sense anyway. From there, I took on a deputy headship in Blackpool for 4 years, and now I've had the honour of leading St Nicholas for 15 years. It has truly been an honour to lead such a dedicated team who believe in the vision we shared 15 years ago, and who day after day give our children high-quality learning experiences. You don't get too many chances to thank your team on a national stage, so I'm not going to miss this one. Thank you, all of you. You are an exceptional team of people, and whilst you might be glad to have a break from me for a year, I'll miss your humour, companionship, the strange games in the staff room at lunchtime, and your professionalism hugely. However, I am coming back. Like many teams, like many schools, we've built a team at St Nicholas, and for us, it was a team that over the course of 2 days took us from requires improvement to outstanding. It was an enormous achievement with some of the challenges we face, but achieved by our joint efforts and commitment. It's therefore heartbreaking to start disassembling that team because we don't physically have the funds in that school to be able to keep it together. School cuts mean I can't pay everyone anymore. It's taking apart a community of highly effective professionals, some of whom may well be lost to the profession forever. Telling valued colleagues that we can't keep them was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And however it's conveyed, it inevitably makes our colleagues feel undervalued. It costs a lot of money to run our schools, and so it should, because the value of what we do is, well, priceless. There are more children in our schools than ever before. We've been asked to do a heck of a lot more than we've ever been asked to do before. And there's a lot less support from other agencies like health and social care out there than before. Schools rely on that critical support. Schools cannot and should not have to do it on their own. These extra expectations mean that the costs of doing the job is going up faster than the education budget as a whole. 40-odd billion pounds sounds like a lot of money, but it doesn't cover the expectation placed upon us or the ambition that we have for our young people. Here's a suggestion. Let's exempt schools from the apprenticeship levy. We have to pay in, but we get nothing out of that system. At a time when school budgets are at breaking point, the apprenticeship levy is a costly and unfair burden on schools. Teaching is a job that allows you to shape lives and determine futures. But you also need to think about our own future. And we want talented graduates to think teaching is the best future they can imagine. On my own journey, there have been key leaders who I've looked up to and who've inspired me to believe in myself, as well as colleagues who've kept me grounded. Notably, one of my colleagues in Blackpool, who, when I told him I was going to be national president, said, "Who, you?" Very few colleagues knew that in Steve Iredale's presidential speech, he mentioned encouragement that he'd given to me as someone relatively new to NAHT, without mentioning my name. That one conversation changed my view about what we can achieve as an organisation and helped me to put me on the path that has brought me here today. I haven't forgotten that, Steve, and I thank you for it. Again, very few people will know that I seconded the nomination of Colm Davis to be our president. Colm has inspired me through his determination, his focus and resilience. And I want you to know, Colm, that you're part of the reason that I'm standing here today. I also wanted to mention Dave Fan, who first introduced me to NAHT's National Executive. And although he's now retired, Dave's had a significant impact on my career and the path that he helped to put my school on as a supportive NLE. I also want to thank our fabulous team at St Nicholas, to the staff who've never shirked a challenge and go above and beyond every day. You are a special team, and our children get a great deal because of you. I know that St Nicholas will be secure in the safe hands of my deputy, or should I say acting head, Claire Taylor. Claire is more than ready for headship, and it's been like having another head teacher working with me. I can pay her no higher compliment. I know that she'll move the school forward, although I am coming back, so don't get too comfy. Also, thank you to my governing body and the Chair of Governors, Dave Barnes, who's here as well today. And Dave supported me in releasing me for the year to take on this new challenge. The final thanks are to my family. To my mum and dad, of course. You were proved right in the end. I am a teacher, and I'm proud to be. Special thanks also to my wife Andrea and my girls Eve and Erin. They've watched me dozing off in front of the telly with a pile of books on my knee plenty of times. They've heard the names Nick Gibb, Nicky Morgan and Justin Greening so often over the dinner table, they'd be forgiven for thinking they're distant members of our family. But back to NAHT. The fundamentals for me in school leadership are about treating the team with fairness, equity, dignity, honesty, and challenging them to be the very best version of themselves that they can be. All of them. Staff in our schools work ridiculously long hours. They don't do it because they have to do it. They do it because they want to give our children the very best start in life they can. Everyone on the team has a role to play. You have to build relationships. You have to invest in relationships. NAHT is a team, and between the members, headquarters staff, and national executive, we all have a role to play. I'd often hear members say, "What's NAHT doing about this?" or "What's NAHT doing about that?" My answer is that you are NAHT, not headquarters specifically or the national executive. Get involved. Make your NAHT membership count for something. Together, we're a formidable force. I've seen at first hand in my vice presidential year the pivotal position which NEHT holds amongst our national policymakers. We can and have exerted considerable influence over government policy, and will continue to work with them. Over the forthcoming year, I hope to repay the faith that NEHT has placed in me by asking me to be your president. The perfect scenario will be to work alongside the government to resolve the issues that are plaguing our profession. Funding, or the lack of it, workload, or the excess of it, and accountability and the pressure of it. These will be the three main issues that I'll look to make progress on. Together, I believe we can make progress. We will continue the work we've started with the Department for Education and Ofsted to create a new accountability system which is fairer, more collegiate, and which doesn't make an industry out of preparation for inspection. We'll continue the work that we've started with Ofsted and DfE to see where we can reduce workload in areas which will see us having more time and impact on our children's learning. I know that we're on the same page with Ofsted and DfE in tackling unnecessary workload, but please, no more myth-busting. Ofsted contributes to unnecessary workload. It just does. That's a fact, not a myth. We will continue to lobby government, and especially the Treasury, for more funding. We will stress that our children have one chance at education, and not funding schools properly denies them their birthright. Not funding health and social care properly means that there are thousands of children whose basic needs mean they haven't got a hope of engaging with learning. If a child has a speech and language difficulty, but we can't access a specialist for them, that inability to express themselves will hold them back, frustrate them, and before we know it, we'll have potential behaviour issues. If a child has serious mental health problems and we have to wait a year for them to see CAMHS, they'll never catch up that year of their life or their education. Those early years are the most important, and we have to get the right support to children. Schools can't do it on their own. I'll work hard towards NEHT setting the agenda about what works in our schools, rather than being told by politicians what their particular ideology tells them works. The toing and froing in educational direction that schools have had to endure over many decades is, quite frankly, absurd. I'm confident that we're moving towards a more school-led system, but we've still some way to go. We must step forward and claim back our profession for ourselves. By leading together, we can achieve all that we want for the staff and students in our care. Colleagues, I'll conclude by once again thanking you for having faith in me and electing me to the position of President for the next year, and by asking that you'll work with me in realising the vision that I've outlined. Together, as NEHT, we can and will make it happen. Thank you.